Welcome to the Purpose Legal podcast. At Purpose Legal, we're redefining the way legal teams tackle challenges, offering solutions that are efficient, client-focused, and powered by advanced technologies. Join us as we dive into the topics that are shaping the legal industry today, sharing insights, strategies, and thought leadership to help you navigate complexity and achieve your goals. Let's get started.
My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Purpose Legal. Excited to be here with our partner, Jim Sullivan from eDiscovery AI, to talk about generative AI in eDiscovery review. I have been in the eDiscovery and legal services space for over 25 years at this point, much of that time focused on the application of technology through machine learning and AI in review specifically. And helping minimize the time and money that our clients spend in that effort. And it's just really excited to talk today about the latest and greatest and where we see things going in this space and in this technology. Jim?
And I'm Jim Sullivan, founder of eDiscovery AI. I've not quite as long as you. I think I started in 2007 as a doc reviewer. And since then, I've just spent most of my career trying to build workflows with technology, improving the process, making things better, really focusing on just streamlining the workflows that we have for doc review, classification, production, all of those pieces. So I think this is an exciting time. AI now is giving us the tools that we never had before that can solve problems that were not touchable before. So I think this is a great time. I think we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm excited to see where we go.
Yeah, I would say I agree. We will see a lot of cool things. I'll just add that it's already very cool. Just what we see today is really impressive with the potential. And, as we get towards the end of this conversation and talk about where things could head as things develop, even with some news this week in the field of AI, there's really exciting things in store for us. I'd like to I think it'd be good if we spent a little bit of time right up front talking about some of the hurdles that our colleagues in this space see when it comes to just getting comfortable and using this technology. And I think a lot has been said about the cost of doing a review. And there's certainly, we always want to consider cost with these technologies, but what we find is that the cost really isn't very high to start using and getting accustomed to this technology and how it can help us. At Purpose, we have we build a workflow around guided prompt design and statistical sampling that really helps our clients get comfortable with how good the technology is, spending very little money. And just I'm interested in your thoughts on that, Jim, and whether you have any recommendations to help people see that reality.
Yeah, and I think you said it, the hurdles to adoption that we're facing, and this goes back. I've been a big TAR advocate and user for a decade, and a lot of the same hurdles with adoption that we saw there, we're seeing here as well. The big difference though is that we're hearing a lot more of AI is inevitable. Reviewing documents in AI is absolutely going to be the future, and the hurdles are more of, how can we get there? How can we get comfortable doing it? And as an organization, how can I feel like we're, building out workflows that are defensible, reliable, and something that we can move forward with? And, I would say, one of the biggest hurdles we have in most of the large organizations are just the, internal approval of using AI and, moving forward with a workflow. So that, I think, we're seeing more and more now getting approval to do that. But the short answer is just use it. Submit some documents, write a prompt that says, find me all documents that talk about golfing. Write a prompt of, find me documents that were sent on a Tuesday, and just see what comes back, see the summary of the document, see the classification, see the explanations, understand how it works. And, I've always said it's probably would take a commitment of 2 hours of your life to really become knowledgeable about how AI works, submitting documents, evaluating the results, seeing it. And I've heard from more than a couple people that have said they just spent an hour or two playing around with it one day, and now they're speaking at conferences as experts because it is really simple to learn. It is simple to use, and it's frankly mind-blowing in what it's able to understand and uncover. So use it, submit 100 documents. The cost on that is going to be absolutely insignificant, but the value and, the other piece is this is the greatest path forward for your career that I've seen in my lifetime, where if you really want to move up, elevate your career, becoming a person who knows about how AI works is the easiest way to do it. I've seen it already, quite a few times where someone who is an early adopter just, learned how to use it, understood it really well, and then, got a great job as, leading the AI, movement at an organization. So I think that, first of all, we just want to see more and more people using it because it really does speak for itself. It works great. It blows people's minds. Everyone that I've talked to that has used TAR, that has switched to this is like, this is a different level. And that will get you comfortable, and it's the best thing you can do to further your career.
100% agree. I've like you, I've been an advocate for TAR for a long time. I still think the capabilities of even just a traditional machine learning TAR workflow, we can do really impressive things with that. To your point, though, this is just a next level degree of flexibility around applying AI to review and just the types of workflows that you can establish and the purposes for which you can deploy this are just incredibly different. So at any rate, totally agree there. Without negating the point you just made about the best thing to do is just dive in and do it, I do want to address one of the things that kind of keeps people from just diving in, and that is around prompt creation. There was a lot of early on in GenAI, there were conversations about, there'll be a new role in legal services around prompt engineering and made it sound really complex to develop a skill set to use the tool. And what we have found is that we just like to take that completely off the table for our clients and just help them understand. You bring your legal expertise and we will show you how easy it is to transfer that into using these tools. The UI, to your point, is generally incredibly easy for using these tools. And we tend to give people a template and just some general guidelines and say, pretend you were writing a review protocol for a team of people and write that up, maybe adjust the guidelines a little bit, or the style a little bit. But you're not a prompt engineer. You're writing a prompt, adjusting your style, and then, don't worry a bunch about it. It's going to be an iterative, inexpensive process to tweak those prompts and make them better. But there's just very little you need to really understand that you don't already know to dive in and use these tools.
I always said if you could rank which people would be the best at machine learning in TAR, lawyers would be pretty far down on that list, right? You're going to have a lot of technical people, a lot of data scientists, but lawyers are not going to be near the top. Where when it comes to who can use words to describe things effectively, I would put lawyers right at the top of that list. This is a skill that just comes naturally to attorneys. They're using words to, define things. Some, clear use of language is kind of all prompting is. And to your point, it's writing a reviewer protocol for the AI instead of the reviewer protocol for the human. And in a lot of cases where we're doing a POC or a test with across a data set that we've already had a human review on, we are almost always just starting by taking the reviewer protocol, copying and pasting the text nearly verbatim from that protocol and running it as is. And we usually get scores that are better than anything you'll ever get with predictive coding in 2 minutes. I mean, and some of the times the reviewer protocol actually even is like terribly designed where it references something that's not there. Like it speaks to it like a human, and it says things like, questions of this, talk to your, review manager or something. But the AI just can pick it up, gets fantastic scores, and then we can refine it at, and through iterations. But I just think that it's something that you do need to understand a few things about, but overall, it does not have nearly the complexity that TAR had, and it is something that I see that attorneys generally do really well. And if you think about it just as write a reviewer protocol like you would for any case that you would have done in the past, and that starting point, can get your team and to our team what they need to then move forward with iterations and making sure that gets better.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. In our experience, it really mirrors yours. A couple of points on that, just to sort of drive it home a little bit, and maybe add some meat to the process. In order to sort of approach this effectively and really get comfortable before you just throw the technology at your review population, whether that's 50,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000 documents, you do want to have that step where you get comfortable.
Right.
And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of what people should realistically expect. But, one of the things that the technology doesn't really do yet is help you identify documents to use as your prompt iteration, your prompt sample. What set of 10 or 50 or 100 documents do you throw your prompts at first to sort of test them out? Just interested in your thoughts around how you go about selecting that sample.
Yeah, we usually, we start with, we're looking for a, fairly diverse sample. So, we would start with almost a random set of documents in a lot of cases, but we want to make sure that the richness is high enough to matter. If you grab 50 documents and 2 are relevant, it's not going to be a good set to use. So generally speaking, we'll either use stratified sampling when that's available, or, basically keywords or other methods to find some good example documents. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to find, in most cases, relevant documents to fill in our population so, we can see how it works on different data types. So, diversity is the goal, trying to get as many different document types as we can. And we just want to make sure that the data has enough relevant examples to really be meaningful. And I'd say in most cases, we even go as high, like 50% relevant documents or more if we can, because that's what we're looking for things. We're generally, we're not looking to exclude things as much as we are looking for positive examples.
Yeah, I think as with just TAR generally, oftentimes we have to remind our clients that we do want some negative examples. We don't want all relevant documents, but whereas maybe we used to shoot for 20 to 30% relevant, we do tend, as we want 50 to 80% of our documents to be of the relevant kind if we can. Obviously, we don't spend a lot of time.
Yeah. Now, and given that, usually relevant documents are more difficult to find. But yeah, in most cases, that's not a huge burden. We can usually find a pretty decent set quickly.
Yeah, when we choose samples for these workflows, we're generally, we always want to take into account if our clients already have identified some hot documents. We want to include those. You mentioned stratified sampling. A lot of times we've used clustering and other analytics tools, and then doing stratified samples across clusters to come up with the diversity you mentioned. Again, the goal is diversity, and there are a number of ways to do it. Another thing we often do is make sure that we've run email threading and near dupe analysis, just to be sure that the samples that we pull are different from each other, so that we're not spending a lot of time looking at similar documents. But anyway, all of that is diversified, as much responsive as we can find, and then just get going.
Yeah, I mean, it's encouraging people to just get going is the goal there. One thing I will mention with that is the removing duplicates. That's the other piece, that because docs are reviewed on an individual doc level, duplicates can be pretty much just wiped out, and we can then propagate the results to them.
Yeah, and there's a bigger piece of that goes even beyond just the sample identification, right? When you're identifying the population you want to review anyway, you need to do everything you can to minimize that. Metadata filters, if you've got date ranges that are applicable, or certainly agreed upon search terms if that's relevant. But we want to cut as many documents as we can out of this, and not mess with as many as we.
That's exactly right. And one thing that we get asked a lot of, how do I define my review population? How do I get to my review set that I want to review? And I think, I don't know if you guys have used a lot of different tools out there. There's question and answer bots. There's things that will help you generate contracts. There's other AI technology in the space. And we oftentimes get some confusion of kind of how this works. Is this going to answer a question? Is this going to be a review? So understanding, first of all, kind of how the tool works is important, because you have to know this isn't a question and answer tool. If you can't run this tool across your entire data set with one question, or it's going to be very, very expensive. So what I like to describe to people is this is like a human document review. When you have a human look at a document, it's going to cost you some amount of money for them to classify that document. If you have AI review the document, it's going to cost you some amount of money that's much smaller, but it's still going to be enough to matter. So when you're putting together your population, you should be doing the exact same steps that you were doing with the human review. When we do human reviews, we always try to cull out as much as we can, get rid of as much junk as we can. If you want to include remove non-inclusive threads, other methods to just get that review population down, because we all know smaller review set cost less money to review. And I encourage people to use every tool at your disposal to get that review set down as small as you can, because frankly, if you were using techniques to exclude documents in the past, I assume that technique was defensible, and that technique will still be defensible now. And then, just, once you get to that final review set, then just do dedupe on a doc level, which is one step that you wouldn't do with humans. But other than that, it is, I try to fit, within existing processes where we can do the exact same process of culling down the data set, getting to a review population you would send to humans, and putting together a review protocol that's in a very similar fashion. And that's how we can get started.
Yeah, we've talked before, and I really like the way you word that around. We view this technology as it sits today, just as we would that review team that we've sent documents to in the past, and everything we do to minimize the amount of money we spend on human reviewers, we should be doing the same thing in this paradigm.
Treat them like humans. I mean, honestly, like this is a classification tool. This is no different than grabbing a human contract reviewer, sitting them down and saying, review documents. You need to give them instructions, and honestly, the instructions can be the same, but, you need to be thoughtful about what they're looking for, making sure, we all know we've had cases where you have a review team start looking for something, and then a week in, you realize you have to find another issue or something. That happens here too. So we just want to be really careful that we have thought out what we need to review before we get started, what our prompts are going to look like, what that protocol feels like, because you still need to do that upfront work, because creating a review protocol is not a super simple task. You have to do some work to understand your case to get there.
Yeah. So, one of the things that is different is the way you work with these AI reviewers as opposed to the human reviewers in refining that protocol. It is a different process. It has to be done. It's the same sort of fits the same black box, but it's just different the way we go about it. So, and we talked about that a minute ago. You're really selecting samples, applying the prompts, adjusting the prompts, reapplying to the samples, and just sort of working through that iteratively until you feel like that the AI is doing the job you need it to. And to your point, it's really impressive right off the bat. I don't know that means across the board that you won't want to do some refinement in most cases. So the next thing I wanted to sort of talk about is, what we've tended to see is there will be some variance in how many iterations and how many sample documents you need to work through to feel good about it. And a lot of that depends on sort of the nuance of the review that you're doing. If it's a really obvious review, you'll probably do less. We're seeing on the order of, maybe less than 100 for a completely simple, bare bones relevance call. If it's a more nuanced relevance call, maybe you're talking about hundreds, but far less than thousands in most cases, sample documents that you work through. Does that match with what you see?
Yeah, and what we're seeing, most of the time we start off with, the client creates their prompts describing what they're looking for. We make sure it kind of matches the format that we expect, and usually we run it. We might run 8 to 10 issues across a small sample set, and usually start off at a point of like 80% recall or higher, and it's kind of like even that first run is almost always better than we would get with predictive coding after hundreds of hours of work. After weeks of training the system, we can get there with one prompt. And usually then what we're seeing is, we calculate the recall and precision on each issue. And most of the time, if we're running, let's say we're running 8 issues, 5 or 6 of them are already perfect, are getting us exactly what we want. And then there's 1 or 2 that are missing something or including something. And almost every time it's just a type of document that technically qualifies under your product or under your prompt, but it's something you didn't want. I had a client come back to me the other day saying, this issue is all wrong. It's coding documents from Minnesota and Texas is relevant, but we only want documents from Florida. I'm like, well, we have to add to the prompt, documents from Minnesota and Texas shouldn't be not relevant. And it's just one of those things that the first time you run it, you come across documents, you say, oh, I didn't want this, I didn't want this. And a lot of times you're just telling yourself, I didn't mean it like that. I clearly implied something that I didn't spell out. And then we just add that criteria or carve out. And usually, I would say our average is probably 3 iterations of prompting to get to a point where we're comfortable and run across a larger set. One thing I will say is that it is difficult, it's a challenge sometimes with clients who are trying to make it a little bit too perfect, where, they're getting, 96% recall and 75% precision, and they're just really hammering it. And, sometimes you kind of have to stop and say, what number are we going for here? What is the ultimate goal? And, I'd say, in my experience, predictive coding, the lowest I would ever consider acceptable would be probably 70% recall and 50% precision. And that is bottom of the barrel, barely acceptable. And I certainly wouldn't stop training there. Where if we're at, 90% recall and higher and 70% precision or higher, I mean, that's a pretty darn good score. I mean, I can count on one finger how many predictive coding cases I had that had scores that high. So I just want to, encourage people. The one thing that I think is a little bit surprising to some people, and same with predictive coding, is when you're getting 90% recall, you are missing 10% of the documents. And so when you're going through that and you miss 10% of the documents, it feels like you're missing a lot. But if you do that with human reviewers, you're going to be missing 30% of the documents. And we just have to understand what the goal is.
Yeah, I think that it's a new technology. We all think it's amazing. And I think it's just in our nature to equate amazing with how perfect can I make this and how amazing can I make it, when the reality is pretty close to right out of the box. It's already better than really successful traditional tar projects we've been working with for years. And most of us, I won't say all of us, but most of us are pretty convinced that even those traditional tar numbers are far better than we're getting with human reviewers. So
I will say we've done a number of comparisons of a previously reviewed matter where a human team looked at it and then AI reviews it, and it's never been less than a 15% recall improvement.
Yeah,
like it's never been close. And that's the thing. And frankly, I've never beat it on a data set. I'll review documents, I'll have AI review documents, as we're testing out things, it wins every time. I mean, it gets to one of the struggles is how do you even score something when the person grading the test isn't as good as the person taking the test? And that's where, once you get to a 95% recall, you can stop, because you're not going to get higher analyzed cases, because there's just going to be documents where people disagree. We've always had situations where we give the same data set to a number of different reviewers and the coding is always different. And so, 95%, in my opinion, I don't know if we're going to be able to get much higher than that on a regular basis, regardless of the technology, because as long as we're using humans to be the judges on it, there's going to be some level of inconsistency in that piece. And I mean, frankly, it's fantastic that, nitpicking about those edge cases is just not a good exercise.
Yeah. So this isn't necessarily a big topic for discussion, but in a couple of your examples, and then just sort of the expectations you kind of set around what precision and what recall we're seeing. I think it's worth pointing out and sort of underlining these technologies are geared toward the highest recall we can achieve, and not necessarily an equal level of precision. So even back to the examples of the prompts you shared where people want to adjust them, more often than not, it's about how do I adjust it so it's not including these documents as opposed to adjusting it to find more documents. The recall is going to come out pretty high. A lot of what you're adjusting for is trying to be more precise. But to your point, in a traditional TAR workflow, a lot of times we are accepting 60, 70, 75% recall. In that range is considered optimal or reasonable for reasonable expectations anyway.
I've probably supported 1,000 predictive coding cases, and I've only seen over 90% recall one time. If we get over 80%, that was a fantastic score. Like I said, 70 starts to get where you're pretty much at the bottom, and then you're just lowering your threshold until you can get to that percent. And precision now it gets down to 50, and it's pretty ugly compared to what we're seeing with AI.
Absolutely. So one of the workflows that we are trying to sort of get a foot in the door for these technologies is around QC. I mean, it's really easy to use the tech to QC a human review and start to see how powerful it is. Any thoughts about how
that's such a good
effectively
use
use
case.
this tool for GenAI?
Yeah, no, that's such a good use case because, really low risk, it adds a lot of value. I know one thing is that we don't QC our human reviewers as much as we should. And on a project goes on for months, those reviewers are going to divert from where they started pretty significantly. And I know, on the projects that I've been involved with, there's just not a lot of, not a lot of appetite for the work that's involved with QCing a larger review team. You have 20 reviewers, you want to grab 100 documents from each, you get to have a pretty big volume of documents to review. Where AI can make that so much easier, because now you don't need defensible prompts. You just need prompts that describe generally what you're looking for. You can come up, even just copy and paste right from the reviewer protocol, put it in as prompts, run it across, 100 documents from each reviewer, and then look at which reviewers have the most disagreements with the AI and look at what those disagreements are. There's a chance that one of your prompts is overly broad or too narrow. That's just, you kind of look through it. It's like, yeah, this one didn't hit on. But for the most part, most of your prompts are going to have accuracy that's far better than your QCer would have. And you're going to immediately see and flag any reviewers that are having just outside of the norm or coding things, consistently wrong. And that's just an easy way to flag them. And frankly, you could probably do it in less than 5 minutes if you just took your reviewer protocol, copy and pasted it in, run those prompts, and then just calculate the number of errors that each reviewer has. I mean, it's about as easy as it gets. And then when you look through some of those, what you'll start seeing is anytime that the AI and the human disagree, it's the AI that's right. And that's when you start questioning why we're doing the first step without AI. But I think that helps get you comfortable with understanding that.
So I may not always say, I think a lot of times you will see that the AI is right. The cool thing about it, and going back to your point about you don't really need to spend time in validating prompts before you start doing this.
Yeah.
You run it, you see the disagreements, and if your initial prompts and the reviewer agreed, then you don't need to do any additional review for those. And for those few documents where there's a disagreement, you may find some corrective action to offer to the reviewer, or you might find some, hey, let me go tweak my prompt a little bit to try to avoid that disagreement. But even if you don't, you're still minimizing the human involvement in the process, which is kind of what we want to do anyway.
And I mean, what you're going to see is out of 100 documents, Sarah disagreed with the AI 5 times, Jeff disagreed 3 times, and then Becky disagreed 35 times. And now we can look, now I can just look at those disagreements. But there's going to be individuals that stand out from those scores, and you're like, okay, something is going on here. I got to look at those 35 docs. Again, saves you the volume of having to review 100 docs from every reviewer. Now you're just looking at either a small, handful of docs from each, or maybe a larger set from 1 or 2, which just makes that process a lot easier, makes your whole review a lot more accurate, a lot more defensible, in my opinion, and just, I think, adds a level of quality.
Cool. Well, Jim, I really appreciate the conversation talking about all of these topics with current technology. And I hope that some of the things that we've talked through today help some folks feel more comfortable diving in and giving it a try. I know we're both anxious to help people do that. It's what we're passionate about. I want to spend a little bit of time here at the end just looking forward a bit. I think in one of our early conversations about this technology and using it for a relevance review, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could combine somehow and do a relevance and a privilege review where it seems like one pass to the reviewer? And then I wanted to circle back to that today, just because even this week, I think OpenAI talked about releasing some of their agentic AI for consumer use and some of their advanced licensing coming out soon. And I think that just in the past 2 months, there has been a lot of discussion about agentic AI in legal services generally. And as I try to envision how that might play in eDiscovery and what that might look like, I've thought about, there are tools that we use to, we listed them earlier, to help identify what a good sample set is that we could use to generate our tools. And I could start to envision what I think would be considered an agentic AI process that, with some collaboration with people, identifies the sample set, creates the prompts, validates the prompts, runs a responsiveness review, runs a privilege review, drafts a privilege log, and some case strategy documents. Now that's, we're not there today, but I'm interested in your thoughts about that, as well as, just what's coming down the pipe in other areas of AI and eDiscovery, and what eDiscovery AI might be working on.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. And, without revealing too many secrets of what we have coming down the pipeline, the biggest thing is that evaluation and that understanding of where you can basically have AI act as a junior associate to go into your data set to, prepare, summaries for depositions, to prepare summaries on your data set, to be able to provide you insights and information in a practical way that you're never going to get with search terms. I want to know, who is this person? What do they do? How are they involved with the case? What is their role? What's their title? What's their job? And that type of process can do that. I think the biggest holdup at this point is always going to be the human's, willingness to adopt some of these things, because we're already at a point where you could have AI do a lot of things that you were just describing, where AI could, basically get a background of your case. It can look at your documents. It could generate the issues that it thinks it needs to find. It could then generate prompts based on those issues. It could review documents based on those prompts, and then it could QC itself and some of those things are already possible, where you could almost push a button from start to finish, where you would just give information about your case and it goes all the way to the end. But I just think that right now, we're certainly not ready for it in the market. But as we get closer and closer, I think that the next step is that analysis piece. And I think we're going to be able to move the analysis piece up, further in the EDRM, where, right when your data comes in, you're going to be able to understand a lot of things about it. You're going to be able to understand what your data set contains, how, which documents relate to your case, summaries around, which types of documents you have and how they're going to help you win a case, summaries of documents that might make you lose the case, as well as information about your custodians and parties. And, a lot less of the just pure data that we've had in the past, where, oh, this custodian talked to this person, X number of times, and more of a real narrative describing how this person was involved and how their communications with another person, how it happened, what they were talking about, and a lot more information that we never got. Frankly, it is just like if you, took an associate and said, hey, spend a week going through this data and learning about it, write me a memo describing, the important players, the parties, and everything. AI is going to be able to perform that type of analysis. So right when you get in there, you're already going to know a ton about your case that you don't already have.
Yeah, I think, I'm kind of I fall on the technical side of things. So just talking through a scenario like that is really exciting to me. However, I certainly wouldn't, and most of our colleagues wouldn't want to overlook, the risks and the possibility of compound errors that go along with that, just like we haven't all immediately adopted self-driving cars, because there are things we have to properly mitigate here. as we talked about earlier, that just there are different ways to interact with and supervise the AI that when we talk about when we even start to think about a process that expansive that AI could control so much of, it really does magnify the degree to which we need to figure out how do we make sure it's on course. We know it's fantastic technology, but things can happen, and we need to make sure we aren't letting them happen unknowingly.
I think comparing it to self-driving cars is a really good example, because you're right. We're at a point where even if on average it could be, meet or exceed the human level, people just wouldn't be ready because, that time that it doesn't, what about that one time that self-driving car crashes? So, well, I think the technology is there even today that could do this and at a level that's comparable to humans. I completely agree that we're not near a point where anyone's going to be looking to adopt that kind of workflow. And that's why I think the baby steps is one piece at a time, where it's providing information to you that you can easily validate with citations, with, where you can actually research and you can confirm it, and then allowing you to use that information to perform the steps. And that, I think, is kind of the perfect way of, keeping the human in the loop, using the human's judgment, but having the AI kind of act like a junior associate that's doing all the legwork for you.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, hey, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate our partnership and working with you and the folks at eDiscovery AI. And again, really pleasure talking with you about these topics today. It's going into the weekend with some excitement.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Fantastic.